Amidst the Serengeti plains, what saves a fragile life from being devoured by lions? Hyenas and the deadly carcass-strewn waters of the Mara River. And when the exhausted herd finally stumbles onto the northern bank in a panic, does peace truly await them? Or is it merely a brief respite before another bloody migration season begins? African predators. A brutal journey across the boundaries of life and death. On the southern Serengeti plains, every creature enters the world bearing a debt. To survive, they must extract enough sustenance from the grass and water from the clouds, find protection within the herd, and possess the luck to see the coming season. Dark clouds roll in from the horizon, rapidly transforming the arid southern plains into a lush, nutrient-rich carpet of green. Hundreds of thousands of female antelopes gather here for a miraculous peak in the breeding season. More than 500,000 calves are born within just a few weeks, an evolutionary strategy designed to overwhelm the consumption capacity of every predator on the savannah. Yet, for the mother antelope, this stretch of grassland is not merely a nursery. It also holds a brutal memory. The previous season, in the gathering dusk, a bloody, pincer-like attack unfolded. A pair of cheetahs unleashed a burst of explosive speed. One lunged to clamp its jaws around the throat, while the other tackled from behind, bringing down her nearly full-grown calf. Despite its near-adult size, the young life was utterly helpless against the ruthless coordination of the two killers. The hunt ended in mere seconds, right before the mother's powerless gaze. That scar from the past has never truly healed. Carrying a growing new life within her, the mother knew she had to protect this tiny, unborn life at all costs. Amidst the rushing herd, she slowly stepped away from the throng to find a space of her own. Rodrigo dropped onto the wet grass in the vast expanse of a plain teeming with lurking dangers. Around him, the massive herd kept moving. In this land, to stop meant peril. The mother bent down to lick the birth membrane from her calf's body, memorizing his scent and uttering a distinctive, low-pitched call. In these first few moments, a surge of natural hormones etched the maternal bond deep into the calf's memory. Yet the mother could not linger. For migratory species, standing up is not merely a milestone of maturity. It is a vital necessity to avoid being left behind by the herd. The moment he hit the grass, the calf's race against time began. With no deep burrows or thickets for concealment, Rodrigo lay fully exposed to the sun and to the eyes of predators. The wildebeest's evolutionary strategy denied the young the luxury of hiding. But in return, it granted them a miraculous ability to stand firm and move alongside their mothers within mere minutes. Remaining on the grass meant becoming a target. Thus, the pressure of the open landscape and his mother's persistent calls compelled the calf to engage every muscle. His slender legs wobbled against gravity, and his body, lacking stamina, repeatedly buckled against the soft earth. His mother's close presence and calls became his only guide, pulling Rodrigo forward. As those small, unsteady legs finally managed to support his body weight, Rodrigo moved toward his mother's flank to receive his first taste of warm milk. For a few fleeting moments, his world narrowed down to nothing but that familiar warmth and scent. Every life that enters this world is a testament to the resilience of nature. If the moment Rodrigo successfully stood up touched your heart, please leave a wish for the little antelope in the comments and hit follow to join Rodrigo on the challenges that lie ahead. Rodrigo is yet unaware of the existence of lions or hyenas. Nor does he understand why the landscape around him is in constant motion. Yet, within this newly formed world, he has one anchor to cling to. His mother. At the edge of the herd, a spotted hyena slowly lifts its head. It is not drawn to the healthy adults. Instead, its gaze is locked onto the calf's legs that have not yet learned to run. Rodrigo has just won his first battle against gravity, yet those very same clumsy steps have marked him as a target. The spotted hyena does not rush headlong into the midst of hundreds of sharp hooves. Contrary to the common perception of them as mere scavengers, hyenas are the patient strategists of the plains. A spotted hyena's heart accounts for 1% of its total body weight, double the ratio found in lions. This remarkable organ supplies abundant oxygen, allowing the hyena to maintain a steady pace of 50 kilometers per hour over long distances without overheating. Despite its immense stamina, the hyena is well aware of the danger posed by the horns and hooves of the adult herd. The hyena moves parallel to the migrating herd, silently observing every movement along the fringes. It tests the vigilance of each mother. Waiting for a moment of inattention, a misstep, or a gap that lasts mere seconds. Rodrigo is steady on his feet, yet his young body lacks the stamina to maintain a continuous pace. As the herd surges forward, the distance between Rodrigo and his mother begins to widen. Fatigue naturally slows the youngster down. A gap opens up. The hyena breaks its parallel path and accelerates. Its gaze locked onto the calf. In that moment, as the line between life and death narrows, the mother turns. She lunges outward, inserting herself between her calf and the predator. Her sudden change of direction draws in nearby females, large bodies, close rank. A wall of hooves and protruding horns forms. Instantly sealing the gap that had just appeared. The threat has not vanished, but the predator's survival calculus has shifted completely. A lone calf separated from the herd is a low-risk prize, whereas a target amidst a multitude of adult hooves could exact a heavy price in dangerous injuries. The hyena slows, pauses to observe for a few more seconds, then quietly turns away to seek another group. Rodrigo returns to his mother's side, his breathing still ragged. Yet his body has instinctively registered its first lesson. Beyond the herd's protective embrace lies a void. And in that void, a predator's gaze can lock onto a single individual. Numbers do not make the danger disappear, they simply make it difficult for the threat to single out a specific target. Yet, the trials in this land never ceased. Overhead, dark clouds began to blanket the plains, heralding an impending shift. Once the threat had receded, Rodrigo nuzzled against his mother's flank, savoring the precious nourishment and familiar warmth. Her milk provided abundant energy, while this close contact reinforced the multisensory bond between them. Her distinctive, deep call maintained their connection across the vast open spaces. While her unique scent and physical proximity allowed him to pinpoint her exact identity amidst the hundreds of thousands of other antelopes. That familiar spot by her side became an anchor, a place Rodrigo sought out whenever the herd shifted formation. During a brief lull on the plains, Rodrigo began testing the strength of his legs, taking short runs alongside other calves. Though he still stumbled on the uneven terrain, he learned to regain his footing faster than before. Whenever his mother called out and changed direction, Rodrigo would instantly lift his head and trot unsteadily back to his place beside her. To Rodrigo, his mother was more than just a source of life-sustaining milk. She defined the boundaries of his safe world. Wherever she was, he belonged to something warm and familiar. Without her, the vast plains became nothing but a sea of strangers. Yet, the quiet of the land was always fleeting. The wind suddenly shifted, bringing the damp chill of a low-hanging bank of dark clouds. The adult antelopes lifted their heads from the grass in unison, and then the rain poured down, blurring the landscape. The sudden appearance of a pack of hyenas at the edge of the territory triggered a wave of panic that rippled rapidly through the herd. Thousands of bodies changed direction simultaneously, creating a chaotic tumult of pounding hooves and swirling dust. Amidst the chaotic jostling, large bodies crowded in, inadvertently shoving Rodrigo away from his mother's retreating form. His frail body struggled to keep pace with the figure ahead, but her silhouette quickly vanished into the sea of their kind. Rodrigo's world was reduced to a forest of massive legs, swirling dust, and hundreds of identical shapes. He cried out in distress, but the thunderous pounding of thousands of hooves against the earth completely drowned out any possible response. Hunger and exhaustion began to sap the young one's strength. Panicked and spent, Rodrigo lurched toward the nearest female. Trying to nuzzle her flank in search of warm milk, she turned to sniff the unfamiliar scent. Then decisively stepped aside to reserve her milk for her own offspring. Such rejection stemmed not from cruelty. Within the vast breeding herd, limited milk supplies compelled every mother to devote her nourishment solely to her own kin. Rodrigo froze in the crowd. Surrounded by thousands of his own kind, yet not a single one was his mother. Never before had he been amid so many living creatures, nor had he ever felt so utterly alone. For a life just begun, the entire world had shrunk to a single pressing question. Where is Mother? Amidst the cacophony of overlapping sounds, a familiar, deep call rang out from the distance. Rodrigo instantly turned, called back, and mustered his remaining strength to run toward the sound. Mother and calf drew close, rubbing muzzles and necks to confirm their bond through scent. Rodrigo nuzzled deep into his mother's flank, drinking the warm milk and listening to her calm breathing across the vast plains. Amidst hundreds of thousands of lives, Rodrigo needed to find just one specific person. Yet, the peace they had just regained remained fragile. From another corner of the plains, the deep, guttural roar of a lion began to echo across the landscape. The distant roar served as a testament to the precarious line between life and death. Rodrigo huddled close to his mother as they moved slowly across the waterlogged ground. His young legs struggled to lift free from the thick mud, making every step an energy-draining effort. The mother antelope was forced to slow her pace to stay by his side. The very mud testing Rodrigo's endurance was also the stage for another of nature's encounters. Nearby, a group of young lions spotted a solitary buffalo standing close to a patch of mire. The prey was massive, but its isolation presented a tempting opportunity. The lions fanned out, slowly closing in from multiple directions. Suddenly, a lioness burst into a sprint and lunged forward. However, the slippery mud beneath her instantly robbed her claws of traction. Her leap faltered, sending her sliding and stumbling right in plain view of the prey. The buffalo immediately turned to face the threat. With a mass of nearly a ton, legs planted firmly in the marsh, and horns as hard as steel, it transformed into a mobile fortress. Stamping its hooves and lowering its horns, the buffalo stood ready to gore any attacker daring enough to approach. The environment had completely inverted the value of strength. The muddy terrain neutralized explosive speed, turning every attempt to close the distance into a perilous head-on confrontation. The pride slowly retreated, abandoning the hunt to preserve their strength for the days ahead. Struggling through the same thick mud, little Rodrigo fought to keep pace with the herd. Whereas the buffalo found security in its own massive bulk and the nature of the ground beneath its hooves. On the vast plains, power is never a permanent throne. It exists only when circumstances and the environment allow. Yet, the wetlands that sheltered the buffalo today would not last forever. The harsh sun and wind were slowly evaporating the very last drops of water. As the water receded, time slowly ticked by across the plains. Rodrigo was no longer a frail creature struggling merely to stay upright. Its legs had grown sturdy, and its gait steadied whenever the herd changed direction. Small horn buds began to emerge on its head, the first signs of maturity. Rodrigo spent more time grazing on grass shoots, while the time spent nursing from its mother gradually diminished. But the land that had nurtured it was also transforming by the hour. Rain showers grew infrequent before vanishing entirely. The lush green carpet of grass retreated, giving way to a parched, scorched yellow. The mud that had once hindered lions had hardened into cracked, rock-solid earth. With every step the herd took, clouds of dust billowed up, coating their legs and bodies. The ranks of its peers began to thin. Within the herd, some mothers walked alone, their calves no longer trotting by their sides. Gaps silently appeared amidst the crowd. There were no scenes of violence or cries of pain, only the quiet absence of many lives that had entered the world together during the rainy season. Spotted hyenas silently patrolled the periphery, a grim reminder that not every individual who started the journey had made it this far. Rodrigo no longer remembered those first moments when he had collapsed onto the wet grass. Now he walked slowly alongside his mother and the herd, heading toward a distant depression that once held fresh water. Rodrigo lowered his head to the hollow, a place that had once cradled the cool, life-sustaining waters of his earliest days. But now there was no water to be seen. Only cracked earth and a patch of shriveled, damp mud remained at the bottom. A few adults patiently bent down to lick the sticky mud, but that meager moisture could not quench the thirst of hundreds of thousands of parched throats. The migration followed no leader's command, nor any fixed schedule. The wildebeest moved in response to ancient signals carried on the air, the scent of fresh grass sprouting after a distant rain, or the ripple effect of movement among neighboring herds. A single animal would begin to walk, drawing a small group along until the entire massive herd shifted course in unison. Rodrigo's mother joined the sluggish, northward-moving stream. Rodrigo followed slowly behind her familiar form. There was no moment of farewell, nor time to look back. The patch of short grass to the south, where Rodrigo had been born and won his first battle against gravity, was slowly receding into the distance. Rodrigo was not ready to leave the only world he had ever known. Yet, the dry season never asks a living creature if it is ready. It simply strips away life's necessities, water holes and green shoots alike, until moving forward becomes the only choice for survival. As smaller groups merged, the migration swelled into a massive living tide stretching to the horizon. Hundreds of thousands of hooves pounded the earth, making the cracked ground tremble. Rodrigo became a mere speck within that colossal, moving mass. Interspersed in the flow were herds of zebras, animals that typically took the lead. This was no perfect alliance, born of interspecies kindness. Zebras, with their hindgut digestive systems, could process the coarse, tough upper stalks of grass. Whereas wildebeests required the nutrient-rich short grass found closer to the ground. The immense pressure of competition for food among tens of thousands of wildebeests forced the zebras to keep moving forward in search of ungrazed pastures. Yet, this convergence of survival needs along the same path created an invisible network of vigilance. Rodrigo did not know the zebras ahead, nor were they even aware of the tiny calf's existence. But in a world fraught with danger, the reaction of one species could serve as a vital warning to another. At the mere sight of a zebra's head lifting in suspicion, the entire herd, thousands strong, would instantly freeze to decipher every signal from the environment. The ground began to tremble with the rhythmic beat of millions of hooves. In the shade of an ancient tree in the distance, a lioness slowly opened her eyes. The wind carried the rich scent of the migrating herd across the dry grass. More tawny forms slowly rose, then silently vanished into the sea of grass. Rodrigo had managed to leave behind the dying lands of the south. Yet, the migration brought not only life to the north, but also awakened the predators patiently waiting along the path ahead. The journey northward compelled Rodrigo to hone his instincts by observing and merging with the flow of the collective. He was not taught in the human way. Instead, he accumulated experience through constant repetition. When the zebras ahead suddenly raised their heads, nearby antelopes stopped grazing. When the adults changed direction, Rodrigo immediately quickened his pace to follow. Whenever a gap grew too wide at the herd's edge, his mother would use her body to nudge him back into the denser crowd. The massive herd functioned like a complex information network. No single individual could survey the entire expanse of the plains. Yet if one spotted unusual movement, the signal would spread instantly. The swiveling of ears, shifts in posture, and changes in movement rhythm were transmitted rapidly. In mere seconds, a section of the herd could change direction and sprint away before any single individual had even glimpsed the cause. Rodrigo's world was no longer confined to the view of his mother's back. It began to place its trust in the subtle signs around it, from a head suddenly raised amidst the sea of grass, and a row of backs turning in unison, to the silence that abruptly descended while the herd was grazing. The light was fading across the vast plain before the herd found the perfect spot to halt. As the sun set and darkness descended, the familiar landscape transformed into a realm of mystery and menace. Rodrigo pressed close against his mother's warm body. In the black of night, the herd never slept all at once. Some rested to regain their strength, while others patiently grazed or stood guard with ears pricked. The distant, echoing howls of spotted hyenas pierced the silence. Unable to see the predators, The herd treated even the slightest nocturnal sound with suspicion. On this grueling migration, conserving energy was a brutal art of survival. Rodrigo could not afford to panic and bolt at every harmless noise in the dark. He had to learn to relax his body while the herd rested. Make the most of the cooler hours for movement and strictly avoid wasting strength on unnecessary reactions. In his earliest days, Rodrigo's only challenge had been simply standing on his unsteady legs. Now, on the migration trail, the challenge had shifted entirely. He needed not only the strength to keep moving, but also the discipline to hoard every last drop of energy for unforeseen life or death moments. The first rays of dawn broke over the horizon. At the edge of the herd, a zebra suddenly wheeled around and bolted. A lioness had been lying pressed flat against the earth long before the sunlight hit, her sandy gold coat blending seamlessly into the dry grass. As ambush predators, lions lack the lung and heart capacity to sustain the kind of long-distance chases their prey can endure. Every silent meter gained in approach was far more valuable than a few seconds of panicked sprinting. The zebra's warning rippled through the herd, but it was already too late. The lioness was close enough to launch a decisive ambush. Dust billowed as the herd broke apart in a panicked flight. The ensuing chaos shoved Rodrigo away from his mother's side, placing him directly in the predator's path. The lioness exploded into a sprint, tearing through the swirling dust. Yet, just inches from the youngster, a panicked adult veered off course, stumbling right into the reach of the predator's claws. The violent impact brought the prey crashing down, kicking up a cloud of dust that obscured all vision. The fallen body, collapsing right before his eyes, became an unintended shield, offering Rodrigo a narrow escape. Rodrigo mustered his strength to follow the fleeing herd, searching for his mother amidst the throng. The herd and his mother's presence remained his only protection for survival. He had escaped the immediate clutches of the predator, but his gait was now uneven. Every sharp pang of pain was a stark reminder that survival does not always mean emerging unscathed. On these unforgiving plains, a minor injury can finish the hunt that the predator itself had abandoned. From the rear of the moving herd, the echoing howls of a spotted hyena pack rose up, locking onto the sound of his limping steps. His injured leg slowed his pace, causing him to fall behind. The herd never slowed its movement for a single injured member. His mother patiently eased her pace to walk beside him, but falling too far back would quickly expose them both to the predators trailing close behind. Rodrigo was forced to push himself to keep up and avoid being left behind. Just ahead, an exhausted adult antelope was slowly coming to a halt. The gap between it and the herd widened by the second. The animal stopped beside a patch of cracked mud, struggling to remain upright before collapsing onto the dry ground. Rodrigo moved slowly, glancing back in bewilderment at the figure that had just collapsed. His mother nudged him gently with her body, urging him to keep moving forward as the herd pulled away. Rodrigo could not yet name what had just occurred, but the motionless silence of that body was unlike any sleep he had ever known. For the first time in his life, the young one grasped a quiet truth of the plains. Not every life that embarks on the journey reaches the end. The howling from behind ceased abruptly. The spotted hyena that had been trailing the pair halted, having picked up the signal from the creature that had just fallen. It decisively changed course, abandoning the limping youngster to head toward the new target. The predator's pragmatic survival calculus had unwittingly granted Rodrigo a precious chance to live. The herd continued northward, leaving behind long, stretching evening shadows and the sound of flapping vulture wings. On that very patch of earth, new grass would soon sprout. The herd could shield an individual from predators, but it could not protect anyone from the limits of their own body. And on the vast plains, the end of a life did not mean the extinguishing of the energy within. It was merely dissolving into the earth to nourish the next generation of life. Amidst the arid landscape, the sound of water suddenly echoed from afar. Rodrigo and his mother lifted their heads in unison. The terrain began to slope as the roaring sound of rushing water grew louder in the air. Before they even saw the river, the herd could hear the violent churning of this natural boundary. Groups of antelope crowded together, their density increasing by the moment. Rodrigo had to constantly dodge collisions with the massive bodies surrounding him, as his injured hind leg had not yet fully healed. The Mara River presented itself not merely as a source of life-sustaining water during the harsh, dry season, but also as a brutal boundary dividing the grasslands. It forced hundreds of thousands of lives to converge at a narrow bottleneck. A place where the terrestrial world collided with the aquatic food web. Rodrigo had traversed dry land, treacherous mud, and vast seas of grass. In all those places, he could rely on his legs to overcome every challenge. Yet, the river ahead was a completely different realm. Where the very attributes that had kept him alive might no longer suffice. At the steep bank, the leaders approached the water's edge, only to recoil in panic. Yet, the surging mass behind them pressed relentlessly forward, shrinking the scant space available. The crossing did not begin with a coordinated strategy. Instead, it was driven by the pressure of the crowd's density and a chain reaction of collective instinct. Beneath the murky surface, the head of a crocodile slowly emerged before silently slipping away. These killers had no need to chase prey across the savannah. They simply waited for living beings to step into an environment where speed and hooves were rendered useless. Rodrigo could not see what lay beneath the turbid water. But the hesitation of the adults was enough to spread fear rippling through the herd. For the first time on the journey, thousands of bodies came to a halt before an invisible starting line. No creature knew who would step in first or who would pay the price for that moment. Amidst the suffocating crush at the water's edge, an animal at the front suddenly lost its footing and tumbled down the steep bank. That first animal's plunge triggered a stampede across the entire herd. Thousands of hooves surged into the river like a bursting dam. Rodrigo was shoved forward by the relentless pressure of countless bodies behind him. His mother leapt into the murky water, leaving Rodrigo with no room to retreat. On the dry plains, the herd had served as a shield, hiding Rodrigo from the gaze of predators. But in the rushing river, that same mass of bodies became a deadly hazard. The waves churned up by thousands of animals, the violent collisions, the flailing hooves, and the suffocating crush of the stampede threatened to submerge any small creature. The surging current and a large animal cutting across their path quickly separated mother and calf. Rodrigo cried out, but his call was instantly swallowed by the roar of the water and the surrounding chaos. Unlike the commotion on the plains, where he could pause to listen, here in the river, stopping meant sinking. From the murky depths, a massive crocodile suddenly lunged, attacking an adult right beside it. The water erupted in a spray of blood and violent tail thrashing. Sheer panic caused the surrounding animals to scatter and veer off course, creating powerful waves that knocked Rodrigo off his path toward the shore. Rodrigo escaped the crocodile's jaws, but bore the full brunt of the turbulence caused by the attack. Rodrigo was not fighting the crocodile. He was battling the ferocious current, exhaustion, a throbbing leg, and the daunting distance to the opposite bank. The young animal's focus narrowed to each fleeting second, keeping his snout above water, preventing his body from rolling sideways, finding a gap amidst the colliding bodies, and kicking on for just a few moments longer. When his front claws finally touched the riverbank, Rodrigo summoned the strength to stand, but his injured hind leg could not bear the weight and immediately buckled. He slipped, and the fierce current dragged him back toward the riverbed. Safety was right in front of him, yet after such an arduous journey, Rodrigo risked losing everything in these final few meters. Refusing to give up, Rodrigo mustered his last reserves of energy to swim along the bank, searching for a gentler slope. His front claws latched onto a protruding ledge of earth. The pressure of the bodies surging from behind created both a risk of being trampled and, unintentionally, a push that helped hoist Rodrigo's body up the slope. He hauled himself completely out of the water and stood firm on solid ground. He paused, gasping for breath. Mud trickled from its coat, mingling with the roaring of the river where the rest of the herd was still making its crossing. Rodrigo stood alone amidst a multitude of strangers that had just emerged from the riverbed. Its eyes searched frantically, but its mother was nowhere to be seen at the spot where it had climbed ashore. Rodrigo let out a forlorn call and slowly moved along the steep bank. Its injured hind leg was stiff and throbbing with pain, yet it could not halt amidst the surging tide of the herd pressing forward. From a group of wildebeest gathered nearby, a familiar, deep call rose above the sound of the water. Rodrigo instantly turned and answered. Mother and calf hurried toward one another, rubbing muzzles and necks to savor the familiar scent. A storm early in its life had once separated Rodrigo from its mother when it was still a clumsy calf unable to run. Back then, she had been the one to find her way back to it. But this time, before even hearing that familiar call, Rodrigo had used its own strength to conquer the ferocious river and climb the bank. It still needed its mother and the herd, but it was no longer the helpless creature it had been at birth. Behind the pair, the Mara River continued to claim lives that failed to reach the opposite bank. Some succumbed to exhaustion, others were trampled and submerged in the crush, and some met their end in the jaws of crocodiles. Their carcasses drifted slowly downstream. The Mara River claimed many lives, yet the vitality of the plains remained undiminished. River fish fed on the soft tissue, vultures blanketed the riverbanks, and microorganisms quietly broke down the remains. Even the skeletons submerged at the bottom of the marsh slowly release nutrients to nourish the waters over the years. Life is merely shifting into a different form. Rodrigo and his mother walk slowly into the vast expanse of green grassland to the north. His injured leg remains somewhat stiff, yet it has gradually adapted to keep pace with the herd. On the horizon, herds of zebras appear in the vanguard, while far off in the tall grass, the silhouettes of lions watch silently. The massive tide of animals surges forward, even as new dark clouds begin to gather in the south. Rodrigo survived this grueling journey not because he was stronger than a hyena, faster than a lion, or capable of withstanding the power of a crocodile. He endured because his mother shielded him during his earliest days, because the herd concealed him when he was frail, because he learned to read the slightest movements of the collective. Because other species inadvertently sounded warnings, and because, in moments teetering between life and death, luck did not abandon him. Yet, the northern riverbank is not the final stop. When the rains return to the south, the migrating herd will shift direction once more. A new cycle of survival will begin, and on that return journey, Rodrigo will no longer be a newborn creature.